Lots of RC brands I've looked at so far have been brands that have been around for a long time. Team Associated, Losi, Schumacher, Yokomo, all have proven themselves to be capable in building RC racing machines. Of course, there have been other companies that have tried to break into the scene themselves, but unfortunately many have failed. Except for this one. Tekno was founded in 2005 making performance upgrades for other RC cars, but later on decided to start making their own cars. Tekno has carved out their own place in the RC world, and I wanted to know how their products stood up to what I was used to in other more established brands. Are they worth your attention? Or are they simply just another brand in a sea of RC cars? In this video, we're going to go over my experience with the Tekno EB410.2. One thing I heard a lot from Tekno fans and other reviews of this buggy is that its instructions and build are some of the best they've ever had. This kind of set my expectations pretty high. Before you go into the car how it actually went together, I need to explain the state of four-wheel drive buggy designs these days, as it's somewhat important. You see, with the exception of Schumacher and their belt drive system, four-wheel drive buggies tend to be very similar in design. Almost too similar. I've owned two other four-wheel drive buggies, the Team Associated B410.2 and the Yokomo YZ4 SF2. Because they're all so similar, they all go together in roughly the same way. Some instructions might be different, they may be in different order, but for the most part, four-wheel drive buggies follow a very similar layout. The Tekno EB410.2 on the other hand is a bit different. You see, when building most other buggies, you start with the chassis and sort of build upon it. With this buggy, you pretty much do everything else before you even touch the chassis. The differentials, the diff housing, the steering components, the turnbuckles, the bulkheads, the CVA hubs, and even the anti-roll bars go on before you even look at the chassis in page 19, or bag J. It's very similar to how their 8-scale buggy goes together. You'll see this as a running theme. Some people are huge fans of this building style and others are not. For me personally, it could go both ways. On one hand, it's nice to see everything go together so nicely at the end of the build, but on the other hand, it doesn't feel like I'm making much progress until I actually get to that point. If I was to do anything in a different order, I would probably build the shocks first so that the final come-together moment arrives a little bit quicker. As for the instructions themselves, well, to be honest, they're some of the best instructions I've ever had the pleasure of reading. Everything was very clear and easy to understand, and the only point where I got stuck was when I realized the regular, or tall servo mount was in another bag P specifically. I spent an unhealthy amount of time trying to figure that out. As for the design itself, it's also quite good for the most part. It's very clear to me this was at least inspired by their 8-scale buggy design to a certain extent, but in terms of how everything is laid out, it is a unique design. Most of the weight is very far forward compared to what I'm used to in other four-wheel drive buggies. I mean, look how much empty space there is at the rear of the car. It's also very clear they've done a lot to at least save weight where they can with the design if they choose. And it does show. This is by far the heaviest 10-scale four-wheel drive buggy you can buy. It also probably doesn't help that you can't use low center of gravity packs to try to reduce that weight. They just won't fit snugly enough in the battery tray to keep them from rattling about in there. Something else you hear a lot of reviewers bring up is the placement of the fan. Unlike some other fan mounts that go on top or behind the motor, this one is mounted on the side. I find this to be mostly a negligible problem, as with what we'll be able to see later, temperatures were not much of an issue with the side mount. Hell, the Yokomo YZ4 I had didn't even come with a fan mount, so there's that. What I will say is a little bit of an issue is the lack of space when mounting electronics. Yes, I'm not exactly the best when it comes to creating clean wiring, but because everything is crammed so far forward, you don't have too much space for the ESC transponder and receiver. In the manual, it literally tells you to put the transponder under the drive shaft, which wouldn't be much of an issue if you had one with a very short wire, but those can be very expensive. Overall, the build was quite good for the most part. With the exception of the electronic placements, there's very little wrong design-wise from the perspective of someone at a club level for racing. Not only that, but the materials and all the plastics and stuff like that, they all feel really beefy and really tough, which I'm sure will help for durability later on. Speaking of driving, let's talk about how this thing drove on the track. Now as I write this, I just came back from Loganville RC Complex during a club race. There are two reasons why I went to Loganville instead of, say, Columbus. One, Loganville is half the distance, and two, it seems as though the box stock setup for this car was for outdoor large tracks. So I bought some Proline hole shots and kind of just went from there. What you're seeing now is the very first time I ever put this thing on the track. I didn't even bother putting a body on it as I haven't gotten it back from my sister as of the writing of this review. This buggy is by far the most tame and easy to drive four-wheel drive buggy I've ever driven. Even on this loose 8th scale size track, the Tekno felt right at home. It didn't do anything predictable in the corners as long as I matched the tires to the surface conditions, and for the most part the car handled the larger jumps with ease. That is, if I could get up to speed on said jumps. You see, due to certain budget reasons, I couldn't run this thing with a mod motor, which to be honest on a track like this is almost necessary to clear certain features like the Dragon Pack in the middle of the track. Even with proper gearing and motor tuning, I was very much handicapping myself when it came to performance on the track in that respect. So for stock racing, I would probably go with another brand buggy that would be lighter out of the box. However, for mod, you can pretty much just throw more power at it to solve the problem. Another thing about this buggy is that because this thing was built very similar to other Tekno cars like the ET410 and even their ET48 Truggy, it's already designed to handle much larger tracks that a 10 scale buggy really has no business being on. As for how it drives on clay and AstroTurf, I couldn't really tell you. I would imagine that on clay it would be very similar to how it drives on outdoor dirt, just with a bit more grip, and as for AstroTurf and carpet, I wouldn't imagine it wouldn't do too well. With the base center diff being as loose as it is, I'd imagine you'd be coming out of corners without as much punch as you'd like. What I'm saying is that in order for this buggy to work on really high bite tracks like turf or carpet, you're going to need to make a lot of changes right out of the box. The same thing that makes it durable and easy to drive on large outdoor tracks, and makes it somewhat heavy and not as planted as other buggies on higher bite tracks. It's part of the reason you don't really see them at the top level in regionals or nationals too often. It's simply because these races take place usually on high bite indoor tracks. Keep in mind, you very much can make a Tekno work on higher bite tracks like clay and even carpet and Astro. It's just going to take a lot of work. Okay, this is the big one. The number one reason I bought the Tekno in the first place. The durability. You see, Tekno is known for their tough as nails cars, and I wanted to see if that was true. Now the reason I took it to Loganville RC Complex wasn't just because I wanted to get this thing running as soon as possible, it was also to test its strength. I've taken other 4-wheel drive buggies to this particular track, and to be honest, none have come out unscathed. The B74.1 I had a while ago got tossed around like a ragdoll. So to test this thing's durability, I decided not only to run this thing at the track known to kill 10 scales, but also run it with the e-buggies. I fully expected something to break, to be perfectly honest, and something did during practice. The little top shock holder broke in basically the worst kind of crash. All of the weight of the car went onto it after a bad collision with another buggy. Luckily, someone had a part and I was able to get back out there. Now of course I had no hope of winning with a stock buggy against e-buggies on an 8th scale track, but that wasn't really the point. I just needed track time. And you know what? Other than that little metal part breaking, nothing else went wrong on the buggy. During the races, other buggies were getting into big crashes and breaking, but the little Tekno pounded on, even giving me the ability to go on the offensive in some of the tighter parts of the track. Of course, until the straight hit and I was pretty much down on power again. The point is, I put this thing through a decent amount of abuse in a single day by running it with e-buggies, and for the most part, nothing major went wrong. Of course, under most circumstances, nothing like running with e-buggies isn't going to happen, but it can be done and done well. I bet if I ran this thing at Columbus and perhaps Beach RC, nothing would have gone wrong. And even if something did go wrong, part support is out there for the most part, at least in the United States, as they're becoming more and more popular. And that right there is the biggest positive about this buggy. Because it's so durable, you have the confidence to do things you normally wouldn't do, to take risks you normally wouldn't be able to take. Personally, I've never done a whip in the air with a 4-wheel drive buggy until I got this Tekno. Yes, the Yokomo was faster and probably more agile, but I knew in the back of my head that if I got it wrong, I had a high chance of breaking something. Couple this with the fact that it's by far the cheapest 4-wheel drive buggy you can buy right now, and I think you've got a really solid buggy. It may not be the fastest, but I don't think it needs to be. And that's all for now. If you liked the video, be sure to like it and subscribe if you want to see more. Sorry this one took so long to make. Lots of things have been going on, and only now is the racing scene picking back up for the year. Anyway, if you want to support my channel another way, you can subscribe to my Patreon. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank my patrons Michael Williams, Lucas Tarka, RC World Discord server, Casey Nix, Ben Reeves, Dave Armstrong, and my new patron, Ryan Lamb. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.